Hello. Hi. Hope you're well. Hope you're swell. Hope you're lazy. Hope you're. Hope you're. Hope you're gravy. Hope you're nice. Hope you're good. Hope you're amazing. Maybe I should keep that. Keep that little rhyme at the end. Hope you're nice. Hope you're good. Hope you're amazing. Upgrade the intro. Anyway, update on the book. I want to keep it in y'all's minds as I'm going through the process. Finished editing a chapter yesterday. If you're curious, like what goes into the editing process, so brief rundown of my process. In the past year, I've been writing this story for more than a year, but in the past year, so last year August, I began the current version of the story I'm writing now. It's gone through many different versions, not many, but maybe 3 or 4. So this is the final one that I settled on. I'm like, okay, this is the one. So I started this one in August. So okay, I wrote the book, 100 and something thousand words. I forgot how long it was. I realized, okay, I think I want to split this into parts. So I did that. I split it into 3 parts. So then I thought, okay, let me edit part 1. While I was editing part 1, I realized it's missing a lot. I feel like I need to add details to make it feel more rich and give it the attention it deserves. And ended up doubling its length because of all the additions I was making. But I eventually finished. I finished like a week ago. Wrote the epilogue, which is like basically the final chapter. And I thought that when I started that process, which was basically me rewriting everything, I had to rewrite a lot just because I realized that I was lacking in certain areas and my characters they didn't feel distinct, they didn't feel important, they didn't feel interesting. So I had to work a lot on my characters, I had to work a lot on the world, I had to work a lot of things. My prose wasn't good. So it was really like rewriting. So I thought that was going to be the editing process. It was not editing, that was just straight up rewriting. So now I'm entering the real editing phase. And in this phase, you're doing things like trimming lines that you realize are too long. So for example, you can say the ground quaked violently. Quake implies violent shaking. Think about an earthquake, it's already very dramatic, very drastic. How does what's a violent earthquake as opposed to just a normal earthquake? You know what I'm saying? You could add violently for emphasis. That's a plausible explanation. But generally speaking, when you're trying to be economic with your words, and you're also thinking about flow. So if you're writing a very long paragraph, flow is important, right? Where it's like you want to trim unnecessary words that might disrupt the flow of your reading, because how it sounds when someone is reading it out loud is important as well, or even when they're reading it in their head. Sentences can feel clunky and unnecessarily long and stuff like that, so you want to trim stuff like that. You want to... I'm trying to think what I was doing yesterday. I'm trying to think of examples. So there was a scene with a particular animal, and I kept using the animal's name, and it kind of becomes repetitive. Like you notice it when you're reading, like it becomes something that sticks out because it keeps popping up. So you want to use variation when you're referring to the animal. So you can use the animal's name in one sentence, and then the next time you mention it within a short space, within that short space, you can refer to it as the beast, for example, instead of just using like spamming its name over and over again, because people eventually notice that, like, okay, it's a bit repetitive, right? So that variation is important. There was the scene with the storm where I kept referring to the storm, the storm, the storm, the storm. It's like, okay, now you add some words for variation there. When you're referring to the storm, you can refer to it as the tempest. When a wind surges in the storm, you can refer to it as a gale, as opposed to just a standard wind and stuff like that. There's many ways you can refer to the storm without directly saying the storm. And stuff like that you're looking for. So you're not really rewriting, you're just making tweaks with regards to wording so that it feels polished, it reads nicely. And these are micro adjustments as well. I could publish the story as it is and maybe people will accept it and like it, but I'm trying to give you the best experience I can, so it's like, okay, it's kind of draining, not draining, that's the wrong word. It is an arduous process though. It's hard work because it's just like you've been doing this whole process for like more than a year and you just want to be done with it. But this is the final phase that I just need to get right, just so that I can feel confident that I did what I needed to do to make this as great as it could be when I finally give it to you, So that's important. So that you have a good reading experience, and you want to really separate yourself from all these other writers in terms of quality. Like, you really want to stick out, right? So that people can be like, this is a high quality piece of work. Especially when it's your debut, you want to make a good impression, man, so that people look forward to whatever else you've got coming down the pipeline. So editing is important. You want to hone. I feel like I have good editing instincts, though. I don't have an editor. Like, I don't have a human editor. AI helps, but you have to do a lot of the grunt work yourself. So this process has allowed me to hone my editing instincts. I don't know if many writers have, because I think when you're a published author, right? So let's say you've signed, like some major publisher has taken on your book, and not even a major publisher, just a publisher in general, has decided to publish your book for you, and they've got a team of editors that'll help you. A luxury a lot of writers have is that some get one editor, but a lot of them, especially like when you're really established, you get multiple editors who focus on editing different aspects of your story. So some people, they just focus on editing dialogue. Some people focus just on prose, and some people focus on just pacing, and some people focus on just grammar. And it means you've got, and then that's just the editors, and then you've got the people like the actual like publisher execs or whoever is in charge of handling your project. They read through it to make sure it aligns with the company's vision and whatnot, and they give you feedback, and you've probably got beta readers who give you feedback, and a lot of writers are part of like writing groups where other writers give them feedback. And so when you've got all these people involved in the project, it's kind of like all you have to do as a writer is just write. So you just, and then just give it to the people, they give you the feedback, and you incorporate the feedback, and it gets published. You don't really have to necessarily worry about developing these editing instincts because other people will do it for you, right? So some writers, they just write. So like the phase I'm going through now, a lot of writers don't have to do it because they'll just, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that. The way I am, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that, just because I have to be involved. it's the way I am, for better or worse. It's like I'm too finicky, man. I'm too particular. So I don't know if I could just give my work to someone else and then just say, here. I don't think that's what they're doing. I do think they read what the editor has done and then they either approve or disapprove of it. But I do think you miss out on a lot when you're not like directly involved in the process, like on a granular level. So I like to be involved in that sense. But it is a lot of work though. The AI definitely helps point out some things that I might miss. So it's not like I'm just doing it entirely by myself, and I wouldn't want to either. It's and one thing people should know about writing, it's not a joke, man. It's very hard, and I wouldn't I wouldn't say it's impossible to write a book by yourself. I don't think it's impossible, but I actually think if I continue to hone my skills, I can definitely get to a point where I don't really rely on input. I can just literally just write from start to finish my book without getting input from anyone, whether it be from AI or from like beta readers or whoever else. You know, I might ask my brother for his opinion or ask whoever for their opinion. I think I could get to a point where I could write a book from start to finish and no one else gives me input and I just put it out and people enjoy it anyway. I think that's possible. But I don't know if that's preferable or optimal. I don't know. I think it's with writing, it's good to have like at least one other's opinion to point out some things you might have missed, one other perspective, because yeah, man, when you're writing especially when you're writing a very long book like what I'm doing, you can miss things. You can definitely miss things, especially like the grammar. I've definitely seen like it's very easy to miss certain details. Very easy. You're dealing with when you're dealing with 100,000 plus words. It's very easy to realize, to forget that, or not to forget, but to not realize that you've misspelled a word or that you put a space at the end of a word so that the S is separated from the rest of the word, which is it's a silly mistake that you might make, right, when you're typing fast and you press space before you've actually finished writing the word, and then now the word is broken up and you didn't even notice that you made that mistake. It can be a silly mistake that you make. Sometimes you forget to put a full stop. Sometimes you forget to put the inverted comma at the end of a dialogue, a line of dialogue. And yeah, man, a second perspective definitely helps in that regard. But I feel like I've been developing very strong editorial instincts through this process. But it is a lot of work though, because you just want to be able to just write and then just put it out. But I think editing is a very necessary part of the process, so just have to deal with that. I was doing a lot of editing while I was writing, so I think it means this phase won't be as strenuous as it could have been as a result, especially as I progress towards like the later chapters. I think once I reach around the halfway point, I'll be good. I won't have to edit anymore, because those I know for a fact those later chapters I did very good work in terms of my editing. It's these earlier chapters I feel like I was a bit lacking, because you have to keep in mind, so this draft I started in January. So I just finished it in July. So 6 months of writing. I've improved in those 6 months. I've improved. Okay, so I'll share this. I don't think I shared this before. And I found this very interesting. Because I don't have the structure where I've got beta readers and a team of editors and like a writer's room where I sit down with other writers and whatnot, because I don't have all that, I'm mainly relying on myself and my input. So I've been using AI to help with feedback. So how that works is you ask it to rate. Well, this is a system I kind of developed where I ask it to rate my work out of 5, and then it gives me pointers. It gives me pointers like, okay, what's an example I can give? Like the dog thing. I mentioned like an animal. I was writing an animal scene. I didn't want to mention what animal it was, but now I've given it away, which I don't think that's a deep detail to give away. But there was a scene with a dog, right? And then the word dog kept coming up. It was kind of repetitive, which is something you'll notice as a reader, even if it's subconscious. And it can kind of pull you out of the scene a little bit when you keep noticing this word popping up. It becomes a bit repetitive. So you want variation to keep things flowing nicely and whatnot. It pointed that out and was like, so maybe come up with something else to create variation and stuff like that. And what's another example of feedback it might give? With prose. So there's this concept of showing versus telling in writing. So you can say, he was angry. So let's say a character says something and then you say his face turned angry or something like that, which is a very basic description. And you're telling the audience that your character is angry. You could say that, or you could say his eyebrows knotted, his face reddening as he wrinkled his nose. So now you're painting a picture of this person's expression changing. His eyebrows knot, he wrinkles his nose, his face turns red. That paints a picture of an angry person without you having to say he's angry. You could say his face reddened as he clenched his fist. He clenched his jaw, his fists trembling. So now, within that context, you say, okay, that probably means he's angry. So this was the sort of feedback I was getting. And, I was getting feedback in multiple areas. What ends up happening, because this has been a process, I've been using this system where I've been getting feedback from AI for a while now, maybe since like towards the end of last year. So I've been getting this feedback, and what ends up happening is that you preemptively apply these notes, these pointers, this advice before it even gives it to you, because you know it's coming. So you end up like, okay, doing it yourself. Okay, I need to remember like show, don't tell. Okay, I need to remember the importance of pacing. Like, don't use too many words unnecessarily. Make sure that you have sentence variation. So for example, you can have short, punchy sentences. You can have long sentences with commas that, that they have these pauses between them. You can have sentences that are very descriptive, so on and so forth. So when you're writing a scene, you want to have a variation of your different types of sentences. You don't want to just have one type of sentence with a similar rhythm, and because then people will notice that, and it starts to feel repetitive and uncreative, and it's just it can be jarring. It can just pull you out of the experience because you want it to flow. You want it to feel like someone's actually narrating it, so that when the person's reading it in their mind, and there's this voice in their mind reading the story to them, it flows like it's natural speech in a way, versus like if you just say, he opened the door, he walked to the room, he opened the door, he walked into the room, he picked up the gun, he fired the gun, the person fell onto the floor, he bled, he died, the shooter left the room, the shooter got into his car, the shooter drove away. Like, that's a horrible way to describe it. It's a scene, sure. It's not a very good one. Because, first of all, this is a one sentence, it's very descriptive, very punchy. And that has its place in certain contexts where you can say very, like, short sentences that are very punchy. And you can do it for, like, impact in certain scenes, but you have to know how to do it. And my book does have that in certain places, but again, it's about variation. You're combining that with other things for maximum effect. And I was learning that through this process, right? So stuff like that, you start applying these things without even being told to, because it's a habit you're building over months, because you're doing this every day, right? And you're getting this feedback constantly. So it actually got to a point where the AI models I was using, I was moving back and forth between ChatGPT and Grok. Eventually I started using Gemini at some point. I was using Claude at some point, because these AI models, they improve regularly. So at one point, one AI model is doing really well, and then the next point, the next one is doing. So you just kind of go back and forth between whoever is the best at the time. But ChatGPT, I feel like, has consistently been the best, especially lately. At some point, Grok for me felt like the best, but ChatGPT, I think, is definitely, it seems the best at creative writing. So its feedback started to get redundant because I was doing all the things that it was telling me to do. So now when I feed it a chapter, it's just like, in some way it just stops giving advice. It's just like, this is 5 out of 5 and whatever. It doesn't mean it's perfect, and I'm sure that if you nitpick, you can find flaws. But the point of the exercise wasn't necessarily to become perfect. It was to hone these very important skills when you're talking about constructing scenes, you're talking about writing a novel, and get myself to a professional level, which I genuinely feel like I'm at now, where it's like, I wasn't good at writing prose before, but over the past 6 months, I feel like I've gotten good at writing prose, which is amazing to say. And I didn't have good editorial. I think I've always had decent editorial skills, but I've definitely upgraded them through this process. My characters were not good, I can say that, and my characters, I feel like I've got strong characters now. So it like, multiple aspects of my story have improved dramatically through this process, and I've improved in a relatively short amount of time. In a few months, it's like night and day, guys. Honestly, it's like night and day, my improvements as a writer, because of this process. The benefit of AI as opposed to working with a human editor. I feel like human editors have their advantages. For example, humans, compared to, at least for now, humans have better memory than AI, because AI is like, you can't work with AI. Like, you can't do more than one chapter at a time with AI. It gets overwhelmed. by all that information. So with each chat that you have, you can only do one chapter and go through one chapter and the feedback and whatever adjustments you need to make. It's a very long discussion you'll be having as you're working on this chapter, right? And now let's say you got a 100,000 word book with 39 chapters. It's not going to be able to do that in one chat, because what ends up happening is it ends up hallucinating, it ends up mixing up details, it ends up making up details, because it gets overwhelmed by the information, so you scramble its proverbial brain. And that won't happen with a human, right? With a human, you can be like, okay, we're on chapter 35 now. What happens in chapter 35? In order to understand what happens in chapter 35, you need to remember what happened in chapter 6. So just keep that in mind when you're reading chapter 35. Keep the details of chapter 6 in mind. And you can go do that back and forth and it'll be fine. And the human can apply their memory, they can apply context and give you proper feedback based on that. The issue with AI is because you're doing one chapter at a time, it's not going to have the context for chapter 6 because it's a new chat. And you could feed it well, remember what I said about one chapter at a time. So you could try feed it chapter 6. If it's a short chapter, you could. But it's not just chapter 6, realistically. If you're on chapter 35, it's not just chapter 6 whose details are relevant. It's chapter 6, it's chapter 10, it's all the chapters, really. But chapter 6 is the main one. But it's not going to have a full picture without all the other chapters that preceded it. So it's like you end up having to do a lot of management yourself, like keeping in mind that, okay, its feedback is not going to be complete because it doesn't have the full context, that it needs to give a proper assessment of this chapter. So I need to work with that in mind. So that is a drawback for sure, and I think that's an advantage humans have. One of them, and humans, I think of the creativity aspect. I know people say AI is going to replace humans in the creative space or whatnot, and maybe I'm naive, but I don't think so. I think creativity is I think AI is a good remixing machine. It remixes a lot. I don't think it can create anything from scratch. Like create something truly creative and in the same way that a human can do that. We'll see. I could be wrong, Maybe that's just me being hopeful. Overly hopeful. But I think human editors always have a place because editing is a very creative process for sure. For sure, Ski. But yeah, where AI shines is it's so fast. So I remember I said I improved dramatically in the space of 6 months. It's because you're dealing with this AI assistant who can get back to you in a matter of seconds. I feed it a chapter in like less than 1 second. It's generated a response. If I was doing that with a human editor, it might take a week. Like for real. It might take a week for the editor to get back to me so that we can continue. Yeah, it depends. And maybe some work much faster than that. But like AI again, like less than a second, it's gone through that passage you sent it or that segment you sent it, and it's generated a very detailed response that's very helpful in terms of pointers and all that sort of stuff. So you apply all this feedback, you go back and continue writing, applying all this feedback, and then you send it again, and then it gives you feedback again. You go through this refinement process, and you're doing that every day, and it's so rapid. It gets back to you in like less than a second, and the result is that in 6 months, I am several orders of magnitude better than when I started this process. And that sounds like an exaggeration. It's not. I'm much better, guys, than when I started this process. Yeah. I really am. I've improved significantly. Some people say don't use AI, and I think that's just a a gut instinct to say that, not gut instinct, but a very reactive response where you're just like, AI is evil, don't use AI, otherwise it doesn't count. Um, but I would say, especially like to young people who might want to get into writing as well, don't let these people limit you or like make you work with one hand tied behind your back. Use all the tools at your disposal. There's nothing inherently wrong with AI, of course. Yes, some people might cheat. Some people might say to AI, write a novel for me, which that's not going to work. But you could like theoretically. I don't. I think it is. I think as of right now, the way AI is now, I don't think it would work very well. Just because of what I said about memory and its limitations in terms of how much information you can have in a chat before it gets very, very confused. I don't think you could generate a novel from scratch just purely using AI. I think it'd be not a very good novel. As of right now, at least. Maybe in the future that might be possible. But even then, I think there'll be a few tells because the way it kind of constructs it does use some of its own reasoning, but it's relying on a lot of data that is already assessed and then using that to come up with something quote unquote new. Yeah, it is new in a sense because it's like it's remixing stuff and rearranging it to create something that didn't exist before. So, but the issue is that it applies the same sort of patterns a lot of the time. Like you can tell. And I've noticed this with pretty much every AI model. They generally use the same tactics when writing. So you can tell when someone, I think it's possible to tell, at least as of right now, if someone used AI to write the novel from start to finish. Just because when it's giving feedback, it writes in a particular way. All these models write it the same way. I don't know if it's because they're learning from the same set of data. I don't know why that is. Like all the models seem to. That's not true. I think Claude AI writes slightly different from the others. But even with Claude AI, there are general consistent threads. You can see that kind of tether them all. But regardless, I do think it's possible to cheat and not do the work yourself. But that's possible with a lot of things. Like we can have a conversation about having 10 people from your publishing company, from the publishing house that you're working with, helping you write your book. And at what point can you say that this is your book and not the book of you and these other people? At what point do you have to like have a co-author on the front of your book? We have to so I think it's possible to cheat with all of these tools available to our disposal, but it's important to remember these are tools and it's up to you how you use them. So I'll say to anyone who wants to maybe write a book at some point, don't be afraid to use AI to help you. I think it's important to write the book, of course, but don't be afraid to have an AI assistant, provided that you are in charge and you are the writer. Because for me, AI is doing what an editor would do. It's literally that's because I don't have a human editor, so I need someone to edit my book. So I'm not going to handicap myself to prove a point. I think the book would suffer as a result. I've definitely benefited from using these AI assistants. They've helped a lot in terms of pointing out flaws, in terms of giving me feedback and training me. I feel like I've gone through an extensive training process where, again, because the feedback comes back so quickly, I can execute on the feedback like rapidly. And I've been doing this for months, and my gains in a very short amount of time have been monumental. Like I've genuinely improved as a writer. It's amazing. So yeah, there'll always be concerns. when people say like they're using AI to help them on any task, whether it's writing, whether it's, let's say you have a video game company and you want to use AI to help you make your video games, whether it's this, whether it's that, people will try to discredit that, but it's like you have to adapt, you have to incorporate the new technology into your work. Otherwise, you're just going to become a dinosaur and you'll go extinct. You'll go the way of the dinosaurs and die out. When the internet became a thing, there were a lot of people skeptical of the internet and whatnot. Oh no, you should only get your books from the library, the good old way, the old way of doing things and whatnot. Otherwise, it's illegitimate. Businesses that refuse to get social media accounts because they want to rely on word of mouth, just like it was done in their time and whatnot. It's like, guys, at some point you just have to embrace the area you're in and use the tools available. I think when done properly, these tools, they make you better. They don't necessarily become a crutch. I think it's possible for sure for AI to become a crutch, but I think it's also possible for it to enhance you in many ways because of how rapid it is and the information it can give you. One way it shines is research. Oh my gosh, research, man. It cuts down the time required for research by a lot. I'm writing a pirate novel, so research is very important to get that period of time correct. My world is fictional. It's not really based on like a real like world. I've made up a lot of locations, but you still want to get certain because a lot of the story is based on real things. So ships, for example, I need to know how ships work. I need to know the various components of a ship. I need to know commands that are given on a ship. I need to know about life at sea. What is it like to sail a boat on sea when the sea is calm, when the sea is chaotic, when there's a storm, when there's this and there's that. I need to know about the pistols around that era that I'm trying to depict, so the 1700s. Like, what is it like using guns in that time? What is it like using cannons in that time? Bombs, all these other things. Like cultural norms and all these other things. I'm making up some cultural norms because it's a fictional world, but I'm also like trying to incorporate some cultural norms of the pirate space and whatnot, the pirate world. So you have to do, it's a lot of research, and the thing is, when you're doing research like that, you have to, let's say you want to use Google. You Google like, what did aristocrats wear in the 18th century? What type of dress did aristocrat women wear in the 18th century? Then there's a bunch of websites that pop up, right? And yeah, you want to go through all of them to get to see who has the best information. What AI does is it just gives you the answer that you're looking for, especially if you ask it in a particular way. So let's say you have an image in your mind of some woman from the 18th century wearing a particular item, but you don't know what that item is called. So you don't know what question to ask in order to find out what that item is called. I mean, you do, but it's a very specific question, and Google as a search engine is not good with very specific questions. So you could be searching for a while before you find what you're looking for. It could be hours before you find what you're looking for. With AI, you can ask an extremely specific question, and it'll give you an extremely specific answer, and you can find what you're looking for in seconds. And it's so good with like those niche questions that might like if you just threw that at Google, like Google will just give you like 20 results on a page and you have to figure it out. And that can take hours, man, depending on what you're looking for, depending on how niche what you're looking for is. Sometimes you have to read books. It takes long, guys. So where AI shines the most, in my opinion, is the research element. Oof. It's helped so much with research. It's crazy. So yeah, like I said, it's a tool, man. It's a tool, and it just depends on how you use it, really. And I suggest that people, because times are changing, I suggest that you learn how to use these tools you end up finding yourself getting sidelined by those who can use the tools, because I think especially in like a lot of businesses, a lot of workspaces, it's gonna make a difference, right? Those who can use AI to their advantage and those who can't, I think it'll make a big difference. But you always see this with any technological shift. People become stubborn and skeptical and whatnot. And then if you're unwilling to adapt, you get left behind. It's just the way it is. So yeah, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong. So, anyone who's looking forward to the book, you can rest easy that this is definitely my story. It's a human story written by a human being. I'm very involved in every aspect of this story. I was very granular with my involvement. So it's all me. You don't have to worry about that. Whether it's the characters, the world, the general plot, that was definitely all me. I think where AI helped, like as a research, was crazy. It helped with prose, it helped with a lot of feedback, but in terms of like the actual story, it had almost zero input in terms of the actual story. I think it helped with like I used it for like help with name generating. So what I'll do is like give me options for a name for a character. So it'll give me like a bunch of options, like a bunch of first names from a particular region, and then a bunch of surnames from that same region, and then I just mix and match. And I did that for a few characters where I was like trying to come up with a name, which is what people do on Google anyway. People will Google like Arabic first names, for example, Arabic last names, and then they just mix and match. So it's the same thing, just more efficient. But yeah, rest easy knowing that this is me. And yeah, I prefer it this way, man. I prefer this process because I like being in control. When you have so many people working on a project, so like I said, a lot of these writers will have 10 people giving them input on their book. It's just, what do they say about too many cooks in the kitchen? I just feel like it can become a bit chaotic when that many people are giving input on something. It can be more than 10, to be honest, because when you consider beta readers, you consider people that are part of your writer's room, and the people from the publishing house, and your editors, it can end up being a lot more than 10 people giving input on your novel that are changing things in your story. That's crazy to me. So this with AI is just like it gives me a lot more control than I would have in that setting. Because when someone's publishing your book, they're giving you an advance for your book. They have a lot of say. They have a lot of power in terms of what you're allowed and not allowed to write about. Like there's certain scenes in my book that might be seen as controversial, that like certain publishing houses might not want to associate themselves with, just because of the nature of these scenes, and some people might be like, that's too controversial, we don't want to publish that. I don't have to worry about that if I'm self-published, and if I'm working pretty much by myself, I can just do what I want. Because AI's job is just to do what I command it to do. Yes, it gives feedback and stuff, but like I don't have to listen to it, and I'm not paying it, so there's that as well. So it's a great tool, and I prefer this method, to be honest. Maybe one day I'll get a human editor, we'll see, because there's definitely benefits to working with a human editor. Like I talked about memory and context and a certain level of creativity as well, like that distinct human creativity that might be valuable. So maybe one day, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd like to bring it. Hey, Father God, I thank you for this individual watching this right now. Thank you for making them whole, unique, and guiding with thoughts, words, peace, prosperity, and purpose. Thank you for blessing this person with wonderful people in their life who love them. Take care of them and bring the absolute best out of them. And thank you for maintaining them once they're there. Do the same thing. Thank you for blessing this person with love and marriage, is sustaining that love and marriage and making very, very happy. Thank you for blessing this person with a spirit of gratitude so they can give thanks for all the wonderful things in their life. And by giving thanks, they can find peace, contentment, and attract even more blessings. Let your presence be felt in this person's life. Lord, your God, that you let them be there for them. Good health, long life, and happiness over this person, everyone they care about in your mind. And I pray. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen, amen, and amen.